Apollo 8 was actually circling the moon. I created this work using references of maps and photos that they had to make everything appear in perspective, a heritage of my association with Bonistel, and worked out what the spacecraft should look like, even the stars in the background. I was always finicky about making sure the stars are right for the angle that we're seeing. And again, that was part of my heritage of respect for the meticulous accuracy of Bonistel's work.
So the stars are accurate in that painting?
Yes.
That's amazing.
Yes. The Southern Cross is just above the command module is the Southern Cross and the stars.
Wow, that's really impressive. I don't know. I love that you took the time to do something like that. Wow.
Most of my paintings are nowhere near that large, but that's an oil on illustration board. And I remember working on this as the White Album by the Beatles was first released and played in its entirety on the air.
So if you just give me a moment, I am going to just
go
through my notes. Mike, there's that little Sharpie on the table. Thank you.
Say middle period.
Okay.
My first NASA work was, well, the USGS work was they're NASA's basically subcontractor and stuff. But my first work I did for NASA was the Viking Mission. I did 3 paintings for them. And originally what happened was, from my connections at the USGS, or from working there, I think he was the branch chief at that time, Hal Mazursky, got wind of a contest that there was an emblem for the Viking landing mission, a little mission patch emblem, and there was a contest among high school students to design this. And so this competition had a bunch of entries put in, and they needed some judges to decide over at NASA headquarters which one would be the emblem. And so Hal said, "Hey, we should have Don Davis go up there." And I ended up going to NASA headquarters. They flew me over there to this meeting, and I was the only artist represented in this very distinguished group of people. Among them were Carl Sagan, Jerry Sofin, who is the biology experiment head, and Les Gaver, some NASA public affairs folks. Anyway, so they had this meeting and discussed the pros and cons of the various entries. And the one I liked ended up being the one that they chose. And so that was very productive. Also, they were discussing the need for some artwork for the Viking mission. And I happened to have a photograph of a Viking-related painting that I had done. So I just dropped that in front of the head of public affairs over at NASA headquarters, and he looked at this. Hey, well, discussion then commenced about my doing some artwork for the support of the Viking mission, and that was my first NASA work. This was about late '75, early '76.
In talking with Jerry O'Neill, did you ever, or if he ever spoke about what government would be like within those settlements, or how people would be living, or just anything?
I don't recall any mention of what the government system would be like. That's clearly another realm of engineering that would require its own expertise and practice. But in general, though, he said that it would be, there wouldn't be vehicles emitting stuff, and it would be a lot of bicycle paths and that sort of thing, because the environment would be small enough so that you could get around by bikes or maybe electric transit or something like that. But I don't recall any discussion of what a government would be like. That's clearly a realm unto itself.
Right, yeah, because that gets into, I guess, some of the later questions of, well.
Yeah, I should mention 2001 was a major inspiration to me, and I saw it dozens of times, particularly in the original 70mm release. In the original release prints, Stanley Kubrick personally approved the prints, so I got to see it pretty much the way he wanted it to be seen. And so I used to just go there many times and looking at the details and such. For some of the 70mm releases, at one time I even brought binoculars because the resolution was so high you could see people doing things in the windows of the spacecraft and such. They were done by shooting scenes and 16mm and projecting them frame at a time and through these little screens and such that were put behind the little windows cut out in the models and such. So it's just unbelievable work that went into that film. There was a lot of R&D in that film, which really you get hardly anything like that in the modern world. That was the initial inspiration, the initial spark that kind of lit the fire in me. But again, like my inspiration for what I wanted to show of life in a space colony, it invariably kind of sprang from my surroundings and the beautiful green hills of the San Francisco Mid-Peninsula area that overlooked the towns, and the fog would go over and such. That was my area of that I loved and grew up in, and so I tended to want to show a little bit of that in my idealized world of the future.
How were you communicating?
Telephone mostly.
Mostly phone, and then would you would actually like physically send him sketches and then he would get them?
Let's see. I'm trying to remember how that would have been. I think that was even before I had a fax machine. But typically we would rely on verbal descriptions of things, and I might have sent him a preliminary drawing by mail. It was either by mail or by phone. Is how we communicated back then. Well, one of the nicest things that has transpired between now and then is I don't have to worry about the original, because you have to get it done. The paint has to dry for a period of time, being oils, either that or you have to pack it very, very well so nothing would physically touch the front while you're shipping a wet painting. And so there was a worry about it getting there in one piece, or giving it the painting to a studio to photograph it and such. And they would never photograph it quite the way I wanted. The way I wanted is to have the painting set up, have a couple of lights on it with polar filters, and use polar filters on the camera to get rid of any glare, any specular reflections that weren't part of the information that I wanted to show. So, but they would always come back. They didn't quite do it the way I wanted usually, and it was just, ultimately I just should have gotten my own camera equipment. Then there was the problem of having the expense of a transparency, a 4x5 being made, and you get it back scratched. All those issues and such. Now I'll create an image and I'll send them a nice JPEG file, top quality, and no worrying about shipping, none of that. So in some ways it's much easier now.
Polarizing lights.
Right, yeah.
All right, so you let me know when you're ready.
We're rolling, ready?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. This is one of the paintings I did as part of the Space Colony inspiration, the Space Colony pulse of work. So this is of one of the concepts that was associated with the Space Colony idea, and that is the building of these giant satellite solar power stations. Large things miles across that would have access to solar energy basically 24 hours a day, and it would beam the power to receiving stations on Earth. So we have a line of these things orbiting high above the Earth. The geosynchronous orbits, so everything it's always above the same spot on the planet. And this is the imagined Earth, say in the late 21st century. I've shown the city lights as being much brighter than today and such, and just as various aspects of like space tugs and various things. And there's the moon with a city, a little city light there at the location of where the lunar base would be, from which the materials would be hurled off the moon. This was the cover of a book called Doomsday Has Been Cancelled by J. Peter Vike.
I see it all the time online. So clearly there's a lot of people that look back and they see these things, and it's like you mentioned, the lack of a lot of dateable aspects to these paintings is probably what has helped them be popular to this day. But I would say my most influential painting I ever did was that painting of the giant cylindrical space colony with the Golden Gate Bridge in the distance of the little buildings and such, and it's a bit miniaturized the way it would be in real life, but still, we're talking about a giant space colony where millions of people could live. And that particular painting was my favorite of all the ones I did of the space colonies, and I hope that wherever it is, it's well kept for.